Hello and welcome to this Chemistry World webinar, ChemisTwin, Cloud-Based Analysis of NMR and IR Spectra. I'm Natalie Starkey, Chemistry World's Science Media Producer, and I'm here with you for the next hour, where we'll be exploring the ChemisTwin platform, which, as I said, is a cloud-based application powered by digital reference materials designed to automate NMR and IR spectroscopy analysis. Please feel free to turn on closed captions, or you might know them as subtitles in some places. If you find that helpful today, you should find the button in the bottom right of your screen, and it's labelled CC for closed captions. I'll just point out that this webinar is also being recorded, so if you miss anything today or you want to go back and watch again, then please look out in your inboxes next week for a link to the recording. Now, today we're working with Merck, and we'd like to thank them for choosing to work with Chemistry World again. It's always nice to have them here. Merck are a leading science and technology company operating across life science, healthcare and electronics. From providing products and services that accelerate drug development and manufacturing, as well as discovering unique ways to treat the most challenging diseases, to enabling the intelligence of devices. Now, as with all Chemistry World webinars, this session is interactive, which means you can ask questions about any aspect of what's covered today. Please use the questions tab to send in your questions as soon as they come to mind, and I'll be able to put those to our speakers in the live Q&A towards the end of the webinar. You won't usually be able to see other people's questions in there, but don't worry, because myself and the Chemistry World webinars team can, so they'll be getting through to us. Now, I would really like to welcome today's expert speakers from Merck on screen now. We've got Albert and Frederick joining us. Welcome. It's lovely to see you both today. As a bit of background here, Albert Farah-Perez gained a master's in chemistry, during which he undertook 2 Erasmus programs, one in Germany and the other in the United Kingdom. Subsequently, he pursued his PhD in organometallic chemistry in Bern, Germany, before joining Merck in June 2022. Albert played a pivotal role in developing the scientific NMR background for an innovative web browser analytical portal. And Frederick Fleissner attained his PhD at the Max Planck Institute for Polymer Research in Germany in molecular spectroscopy and multivariate data analysis of protein structure. He worked as a product manager for Raman spectrometers for several years before joining Merck in 2020. Since then, his focus has been on developing software solutions for infrared spectroscopy. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing more from both Albert and Frederick during the course of the webinar. And as I said, after we've seen their presentations, then we'll enter into the Q&A section of the webinar, where they'll be able to answer anything that you send in. So please start sending in questions whenever you're ready. But quickly, before we begin, I'm going to hand over to Frederick first, but we're actually going to go through a quick poll for the audience. So it's just a little bit of fun. If you want to join in, that would be great. I'll launch the poll on screen now. We've got a few of these throughout the webinar. This first question is asking, in which area are you using spectroscopy? If you aren't, don't worry, don't feel like you need to answer, but it just gives us a nice little bit of background about who our audience are today and what kind of areas you're interested in hearing more about. So at the moment, we're strongly skewed towards an academic audience. So we've got about 80% of the audience are academic. Just so you know, we've got about 13% at the moment in industry and R&D, and then the remaining 7%. So it's looking, strongly an academia audience, which is very interesting. I'm going to end the poll in just a few minutes, a few moments, sorry, not minutes, that would be ages. We don't need that long to look at this poll. Right, I'll end it now. Thank you very much for joining in with that poll. And I'll just remove that. Brilliant. So I think, we're going to head over to Frederick now. We're going to get your presentation shared, and then I will be back in a bit so we can look at the second poll. Yeah, that's perfect. That's the correct one. Okay, you take it away. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. So today I would like to talk about ChemisTwin as a cloud-based analysis software for NMR and IR spectroscopy. And during this presentation, we will talk about the ChemisTwin portal itself. So what are the advantages of moving away from local installations into the cloud with software? Then I will follow in and explain a little bit the analysis workflows we can already cover in infrared spectroscopy. And then I would hand over to my colleague Albert, who is the expert for NMR spectroscopy, where he will give an insight into the available analysis workflows and how the software can be used for quantification, followed by the summary and a Q&A session. All right, so what are we talking about here with this ChemisTwin portal? And first of all, I would like to set up the terminology a bit. So when we talk about ChemisTwin, we are talking about the online platform for the analytical spectra interpretation. So the software itself, that's ChemisTwin. And within ChemisTwin, we use the so-called digital reference materials, so-called dRMs. And those are actual digital recordings of physical reference materials. And they are produced under highest quality aspects, meaning they can really act as a reference material in the digital world. And in the next years, hopefully this will also be established in the regulatory field. So, and why are we actually working on this? Well, imagine a world where a scientist can actually analyze their data anytime and anywhere. And at the moment, still a lot of analysis tasks have to be performed in a laboratory, where you usually have a dedicated computer, often running in really old conditions like WinXP or really old software. And based on those local machines, you do your analysis and get your result, which is then stored in a report form or even like saved or printed. And the idea is that now we transfer this entire analysis process into your browser, where you can just log in anytime and you can also work with your data anywhere. And just as a metaphor or as an analog on here, think about the music industry. So 10, 15 years ago, we were still like owning our like storage media like cassette or DVD or CD, while today it's really all about a service, meaning like, for example, Spotify. And now we want to do the same for those analytical workflows. So in a bit more detail, what you can think about is, well, your analytical workflow usually starts with your sample preparation, and you would like to better understand what you have in front of you, like what is inside your cup here. And to do so, you will employ analytical technologies. You use an instrument to determine certain measurement parameters or like certain measurement spectra out of the sample, and then you will interpret this. And often this is done by comparing your reference you have at hand or in literature against your sample spectrum or your sample data. And with ChemisTwin, what we will do now is we will try to get rid of the reference literature as well as the physical materials here in this aspect. And instead, we will have a cloud-based spectra library. And also the result calculation will be just done within this portal. So it's all in one framework. And you can then also trace back the entire processing and how this result was generated. So what are the main advantages we are talking about here? Well, first of all, cloud-based analytical software brings you the advantage of being usable from anywhere. So wherever you are on the planet, when you travel to a conference, whatever, you can just log in and continue your analysis workflow. And you can also work together with your co-workers or your lab mates, seeing that, for example, a supervisor can approve a certain analysis by just also logging into the portal and checking what the co-workers have worked on in the past and then interact with that. The next strong argument is the data quality, meaning that we provide traceable data that is traceable down to the physical products. And here we provide the entire available metadata, for example, the quality grade, but also the production batch. And I will come to this in a few minutes. This even goes so far that you can look up the certificate of analysis of the original physical material that was used to record the analytical spectrum we use as a reference. So we have a large spectral database, and this is also continuously updated. And this is just appearing in the background. So you don't have to order new like storage media, new DVDs containing new spectral libraries, but instead just having the same account, it will just be updated once in a while, and the available reference data will grow in the background. Approval workflows and documentation is possible within this ChemisTwin software. And you can also export reports showing your analysis results. Next, I think that's also quite interesting when you think about larger laboratories or core facilities where you have multiple instrument manufacturers in the game. Thinking about, you have an FTIR spectrometer from Bruker, but next door you might have another spectrometer from Thermo Fisher. And usually now you will take different software to interpret this data. And with ChemisTwin, we are agnostic to instrument manufacturers, meaning you can upload spectra from multiple instruments and just run the similar interpretation of those. Last but not least, and this I will just address shortly, our pricing aspect will be a pay-per-use model. So instead of just having really high upfront costs for the libraries, we just agree on a pay-per-use. So the more you will use the software, the more you have to pay. And if you don't use it, then the costs are basically not there. So where is ChemisTwin sticking into this analytical workflow? So for both infrared spectroscopy and NMR spectroscopy, your journey usually starts with sample preparation. So this is something that's still required in your lab. So you have to weigh in your samples, you have to prepare it, and then you have to acquire the spectrum. And this is all done with the standard instrument software, which has control over the instrument and the entire equipment. Next, however, we step in and say, now you can upload this existing data into ChemisTwin, where all the processing and the result calculation will take place. And last but not least, also an approval process, and the final report will be generated within ChemisTwin and is also stored with ChemisTwin. So a little bit further about the cloud-based, I just would like also to mention that this actually then requires no local software installation, as it runs in your web browser. So this is something I think also quite nice to consider, that you don't have to talk to your IT people first and there is like a lengthy process in installing software. It's just a login in your browser and it runs everywhere. Also, when you think about hardware requirements for spectral calculation or simulating of spectra, here we basically do all the calculations on the server side, so nothing will happen on your local machine that requires certain hardware. All right, the next aspect I briefly would mention is within the ChemisTwin portal, we allow to set up various user and roles, meaning you can duplicate your lab organization within ChemisTwin. In a sense that you can set up an organization that includes multiple laboratories that are specific to the technologies. And within each laboratory, you can assign lab managers, but also lab members or admins for the IT administrative stuff and subscription management. ChemisTwin is instrument agnostic, meaning independent from the spectrometer manufacturers, and the analysis results can be taken or can be calculated for various spectrometers as a source. And at the moment, we support for NMR spectroscopy the file formats JDX or DX, the JDF format and the zip format, while for IR spectroscopy, where there is a pretty large zoo of file formats already available, we started with the most common ones, meaning also the DX or JDX format, but then also .spc, SPA, the Bruker format, which is .0 or .number, and the Perkin-Elmer format .sp. In the future, we also will add additional file formats for example, Shimatsu instruments. So this said, those files can be all imported into ChemisTwin and then processed and used to calculate a PDF report out of it. All right, with this, I would briefly talk a little bit about the use cases we can cover already for infrared spectroscopy. And just as a reminder, and just to be on the same page here, infrared spectroscopy is a widely used analytical method. So it's all over the place in many chemical laboratories, but also QC departments have it available. And usually it's used for standard measurements and screening technologies. It's based on the absorbance of light by molecular vibrations, and an IR spectrum will provide you a unique fingerprint of your molecules that you have in your sample. At the moment, ChemisTwin for IR spectroscopy focuses on the mid-IR range. So we are not addressing near-infrared spectroscopy or gas phase IR at the moment, simply as those sub-technologies would require like a more sophisticated model building in the data interpretation. For the mid-IR range, we can cope with spectra collected in transmission mode in various geometries, but also with standard ATR recordings, which is, I think, at the moment already 80% of the use cases, at least in industry. Infrared spectroscopy is used for identification and qualitative analysis of your sample, but also in some areas for quantitative measurements, which then will require a dedicated calibration. And also, just as a side note here, IR spectroscopy is also used in the pharmaceutical industry, and there are certain monographs from the US Pharmacopoeia, but also the European Pharmacopoeia that is requiring IR spectroscopy as an identification by comparing against a certified reference material. So in ChemisTwin, we at the moment allow 3 use cases, and the first one is the most common one, basically the identification of an unknown sample. So you have something in front of you, let it be a white powder, or as recently in, I think, Australia or New Zealand, some chewy, globby something they found on a beach, and you would like to investigate what this material is. And then you take your IR spectrum and make the comparison against the reference library. The next case is the qualitatively purity check application, where you know what sample you would expect. For example, by an incoming goods inspection, you would expect paracetamol as a sample, and then you double check, is it indeed the sample I would expect, or are there impurities in there or like unwanted substances? And last but not least, there's also a quantitative similarity check, where different peak areas are integrated, and then either peak by peak or in a peak ratio, you can compare between a reference and your sample spectrum. Coming to the reference data, I would like to point out that already now we have a vast catalog of compounds under different quality grades in ChemisTwin. And a lot of those materials are from certified reference materials or analytical standards, and they were recorded according to the highest possible quality grades and procedures that we have in place. And for those materials, we now have the traceability that ensures that the reference spectrum you see at the end can be traced down to the actual released product that was used for the recording. Speaking about numbers, so at the moment we have about 18,000 spectra for ITR and about 10,000 for transmission from the Sigma Aldrich libraries available, covering a general chemical portfolio. However, also from our day-to-day QC departments all over the world, we already have about 5,000 ATR spectra in the system, and this is something where additional IR data from our product releases is added to the portal on a monthly basis. Last but not least, I also would like to point out that ChemisTwin is open for third-party collaborations. So if you in your laboratory have an interesting set of reference spectra collected, please reach out to us and we can see if there's a possibility to include this into ChemisTwin, acting more like a marketplace for analytical data. And with this, I would briefly stop sharing my slide deck and go right into my web browser to demonstrate you a bit about ChemisTwin. All right, so now you should see my web browser, and I'm already here in the chemistwin.com web page. And right after logging in from anywhere, you will end up with a so-called dashboard, which is the, let's say, the home panel for this software. So you see I'm logged in here. There is some notifications that are addressed to myself. And on the left, you have various menu points starting from the dashboard, but then also the analysis database where previous analysis are stored. We have a search functionality where you can look up all the included substances for ChemisTwin. We have favorites to make things a bit faster for you in your routine analysis. There's already an audit trail in place, even though the software is currently not fully GMP compliant. You can go immediately to the web shop, and we have like organization and settings where you can, for example, set up your instrument with certain accessories and also add a calibration. And based from this dashboard, you then also can, of course, start a new analysis, look on the ongoing analysis either from yourself, or if one of your lab colleagues says, well, please take a look here and approve this, then you can also go into this. And a little bit down here, you see the previously completed analysis, where then also a report is available. So before we go into the analysis, I would briefly look a little bit deeper into the reference materials. And herefore, I just go for the search reference. And we just go, for example, for alcohol. And then you can already see like what matches we have in here, starting from, like, say, the classical alcohol, but then it all goes down to cetyl alcohol and so on and so forth. And here you see all the details and information we have now in the system for the substance. So general information like CAS number and molecular formula, but also here now we have the individual reference spectra that are available, and I will just go into the details here. So you see, again, the substance, but then also the physical product details of the substance that was used for recording. You see the IR spectrum immediately, and you see also the acquisition parameters, like whatever sampling technique, number of scans, resolution, the entire range that is covered, as well as like when this reference material was released. And what you now can also do when you would like to see a little bit further here into the details, you can take the physical product number and the product batch number and just go to the sigmaaldrich.com webpage and just look up this material. So we can really look into like what was used here as a substance. And here you see now for this lot in the production, you see the certificate of analysis. And here all the details starting from the date, starting from storage conditions, purity, and so on. This is all behind. Also then the GC data, basically all you might need to investigate further, like what type of reference really is this. All right, so let's just close this, go back to the dashboard. And now we would run a new analysis just by clicking here. And the analysis then starts by either drag and dropping your IR spectrum into the system, or by choosing the file just by your browser. So I will pick this one here. So now the IR spectrum gets uploaded into the system. And while doing this, also a quality check is performed. So if there is, for example, saturation in your spectrum, or if certain signal-to-noise parameters are not achieved. So when your spectrum is really noisy, the system will tell you, look, it's likely not to result in something meaningful. Please provide something of like with better recording. Here you can also just zoom in and take a look if this is really your spectrum, or if you mistakenly have uploaded something wrong. Next, you would, of course, then select the type of analysis. So you have to tell the system, by this spectrum I've provided, what do we want to do with this? And in this webinar, I would only focus on the identification. So you would select this here. You can provide additional information about this sample you've recorded. For example, like if there's a certain product behind this, or if this is a certain experiment in your measurement plan. You can all provide this here so that it will be stored with these results. And before you can start then the analysis, you would also have to pick the actual references that should be used for the comparison. And here you can just select what you think is likely the category where your sample is matching to, and you would then, by just clicking this button, start the analysis. And now this algorithm will go through all available data and make a one-by-one comparison and figure out like what is the most similar spectrum in the available reference libraries compared to my sample spectrum. And the similarity we indicate by a so-called match factor, giving the range from 1 to 100%. And you can see now, as a result, we identified the alcohol with a match factor of 88%. And below here, you can also have a direct comparison between the input spectrum you've provided in green and the reference with the match factor in purple. We can also go into the overlay function here to really see, okay, where are differences between my input spectrum and the reference. And for example, here in this area, I zoom in a bit, you can see there's like this shoulder likely resulting in the lower percentage in the match factor. And then also, of course, leading to like the difference between the spectra. Maybe also just for convenience reasons, so in case you are more familiar with the transmission view, we also have this available, so you can either switch this here or in the settings. So depending if you like to have the IR spectrum shown in transmission or in absorbance, this is both possible just by clicking one button. We also have a table of assignment where the identified peaks of those spectra are listed up to make a comparison if the peak center positions are on the right place. And lower down, we have then also the matching reference information for you. Also here again, like with all available details, also the product number and the physical batch numbers to really ensure that you understand what reference we have identified. Last but not least, the analysis would have to be either rejected or approved by you. And after this step, you can then create a report, which either is stored in the system, or you can share it via email or download it as a PDF to be stored in your local machine or in your web system. All right. And with this, I would stop sharing and briefly hand over to Natalie for the second poll.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Frederick. It's always nice to see a demo of the software as well. I'm sure that's really valuable for everyone watching as well. I think we're going to share a link as well to check out that software. So we'll share that in the chat box for everybody so you don't miss that. I'm going to bring up our second poll now. So this one is asking, would you rely on simulated spectra as your reference instead of experimentally recorded ones? Again, if it's not relevant, that's fine. You don't need to take part in the poll. We'll just have a little look at what the audience is thinking today. And then we'll be moving on to Albert after this to hear a little bit more detail about the software. And sure, it's really good. We've got some questions coming in. So thank you for everyone sending in questions. We've got all those. We are receiving them. So I'll be able to move over to those once we've spoken to Albert. Okay, do you know what? I'm going to stop the poll there because it's pretty much 50-50 on those results. So it's kind of moving around a little bit, but I mean, if I stop it now, it's, yeah, 48% simulated is good enough and 52% no measured data is needed. So I don't know if that's what you were expecting, Frederick.
Actually, I was expecting a much lower confidence in the simulated spectra, but I mean, this is very insightful and interesting to us to really understand, okay, there is confidence that now simulated also IR spectra are something, and there is traction into this field. So I think, yeah, there was good improvement. And also when we think about potential AI-based solutions in the near future, this is definitely also a way to go. However, in my understanding, there should always be some sort of anchorage in reality. So But again, like it's quite interesting to see this 50-50 result. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you there. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's move on to Albert. We're going to get him on screen now and hopefully get his presentation shared. Brilliant, that's your presentation. I will disappear for a moment. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Natalie. So I'm going to talk about NMR spectroscopy and the module that we have in ChemisTwin. So first I'm going to start with a brief overview of the NMR, right? So why we chose NMR? It's because it's an efficient and widely used technique for structural elucidation and characterization of organic compounds. So with NMR, you can get structure information as well as quantitative information. So as you can see here, so when you perform, for instance, a quantitative analysis, you need to bring your sample. Normally you have internal standard, you need to weight both of them, bring them into the NMR tube, dissolve them in the deuterated solvent, record an NMR, and then you can get this NMR that you can see here as an example for ethyl acetate. So as you can see in the NMR, by the colors, you can easily identify what are the parts of the molecule due to the chemical shifts as well as with the multiplicity, right? And then with the use of an internal standard, you can get the concentration plus sometimes the uncertainty when you want to calculate that. A really nice thing of NMR is that the spectra are comparable within the instruments. So it doesn't matter where you're recording the spectra, as long as you keep the same solvent and a fairly close concentration, you will have like a really similar spectra. And that was our motivation to try to build up something in order to be able to, the customer allow to compare the sample with our standard spectra. So I'm going to go a bit deeper on how we are producing those dRMs for NMR. So as you know, Sigma Aldrich, we have been like synthesizing molecules since quite a while now, and we have a catalog of about 200,000 products, and most of them has been basically characterized by also NMR spectra. And what we are doing now is to take those spectra that has been used for the release of the material, and we take them and then we bring them into ACD Labs, which is basically our software that is behind the ChemisTwin portal for the NMR workflow, and it's the one allowing to compare the sample with the standard. So what I'm doing there is I bring the spectra, I bring the molecular structure, and then I ask to the software to simulate the spectra for that specific compound and to assign all the protons from the predicted spectra that they have simulated to our experimental spectra. When I have everything assigned, then what I do is basically check that all the assignments are correctly done by basically using either NMR knowledge or a 2D NMR, and then correct manually the ones that they have not been correct assigned. Once this information is optimized, then it's basically send it to our QC and QA that I'm going to talk later, and then basically the chemical shifts and all the relevant information about the spectra is being saved in our database. And how we envision to use this data is we envision that the customer brings like a spectra of a specific sample, and then they just choose, for instance, what is the spectra that they want to select against with, and then we can compare the full spectra, and then we can calculate the match factor between the customer and our standard. Similarly, that what Frederick just showed before. So as I said, once we do our assignments, there is a QC and a QA. They're checking that the spectra is good, has a good resolution, the peaks all are looking fine, and when all of these conditions are accomplished, then they're released into our database. So we have already released 207,050 digital reference materials, and then we have also about 57,500 theoretical spectra. And you will maybe wonder what are those theoretical spectra. So every time that I'm doing the assignments and I'm recording it into or bringing it into the database, our algorithm is learning about all the chemical positions, so all the chemical shifts, and as well as taking into account all the conditions. So therefore, we can, now that we have a kind of algorithm that is already available to predict quite accurately the spectra, then we have said, okay, then meanwhile, we still growing the database, just predict the spectra for all those molecules that I just showed, and then allowing the customer to also compare the samples with spectra that are still not available as experimental, but at least as predicted spectra. And I'm going to move and show a little bit about quantitative NMR. So this is basically a classical quantification workflow. When, I don't know if you are familiar with quantification, but there's two main approaches to do quantification by NMR. So there is the internal standard quantification and the external standard quantification. So the internal standard means that you have your sample and your internal standard in the same NMR tube, right? And then before to do that, you need also to be sure that the internal standard and your sample are not interacting, as well as they're not overlapping the peaks. Otherwise, you're not able to quantify the target molecule. In contrast, when you want to do like an experimental external standard, then you have the sample and your standard in independent tubes. So therefore, there is no more interaction between them. So then you don't need to worry about if there is any kind of overlapping or reactivity between them. But that sometimes it's also lowering a bit the accuracy between the internal and the external standard quantification. So what we want to do here is to introduce a digital external quantification. So what it means is that you can just take your sample, dissolve it in the deuterated solvent, then make your measurement, and then bring the measurement into ChemisTwin so that we can calculate the concentration for you. And now you will be wondering how you are able to quantify a compound from our instrument if you don't know anything about it. Well, because prior to the quantification, you need to do kind of a calibration of your instrument. And how is that performed? Is that we will ship you a calibration standard that then you just need to follow the linearity guidelines that we have for the calibration. It's about 6 measurements of a standard that we send you, and just varying the reciprocating across your range. And once you make these 6 measurements, then you can upload them into ChemisTwin, and then we're gonna basically calibrate your instrument, and we will know what is the sensitivity of your instrument. Once we know that the sensitivity, we are able to calculate the concentration from our standard recorded in our instrument into your instrument, basically. And those calibrations are active for a month, and after a month, we ask you to basically perform a health check, which is one measurement more or less in the middle of the range of the receiver gain, to be sure that your calibration is still valid. So we have 4 different use cases for NMR workflow in ChemisTwin. So the first one is the identity verification of known substance. The second one is identification of any unknown substance. So basically, you don't know what you have, and you bring the spectra into the portal to try to identify what compound you may have as a main product. Then we have also the use case 3, which is a mix between the identity verification and the quantification of a substance. So you can first verify the identity and then quantify how much of it you have. And then the last use case, which is the quantification of any organic compound that is soluble in your solvent. So this one allows the customer to select which peak they want to use for the quantification and then perform the content determination. So as you can see, I have this use case 1 and 4 highlighted because those are the ones that I'm going to show you today in our ChemisTwin portal. So let me switch between my screens. So now you should be again seeing the ChemisTwin portal. Again, that's the dashboard, really similar, the same as Frederick just shown. And before we go to the analysis, I want also to show you that we have also here, you can search the references that we have available. And you can search by the latest ones that you have used and all the substances. So basically here you can filter between the dRMs that we have and also the theoretical spectra that are available. So 1 second, that is loading the page. So here we have, now it's going to show up all the substances. And similarly, as Frederick has explained, then you can search also for your references. You can search by cast number or molecular name and so on. So something it looks like going on. So 1 second about my connection, just to be sure that everything is fine. Yeah, there we go. So here you have all our substance that we have, and then you can filter as well by quality grade. So we have the dRMs or the theoretical. Those ones are the ones applying for NMR spectroscopy. And similar that what Frederick shown before. So when you look for specific compound, then you can also see the details and how it has been recorded, the solvents, all the parameters that we have been used for recording the spectra, and then you can see also the spectra, how it looks like. And I think that's really helpful, especially when you want to record the sample. You can know already where your peaks are going to appear. So then you can also, that can help you to select what kind of solvent you want to use for recording the spectra, as well as if you want to do some quantification or internal quantification, then you know in where should be your standards coming up so that it does not overlap with the peaks of interest, right? So with that said, let's jump into the proper demo. So first we're gonna perform a new analysis. And in the first case scenario, what I'm gonna show is the verification. So here I want you to imagine that you are, like you perform a reaction and now you got the spectra of it and you want to know if you have your final product or your starting material as a main component, right? So you just go to here and you see the different type of analysis that we have. We're going to go for qualitative. Here you can perform identification or verification, as I just mentioned before. The identification will be just clicking on searching the whole library and then see if there is any match with this spectra. But what we're going to do is the verification. So we're going to go down and select the molecule that we want to compare with. So again, as Frederick shown, here you have all the metadata taken from your analysis, and here you can add any kind of detail that you find relevant for your reports. Then you just need to add the molecule. So we're going to add quickly the Gisalofop, which will be your starting material, and we're also going to add the proper Gisalofop, which is the compound of interest that you're looking for. And then we're just going to run the analysis. So what's happening now is first we taking in your metadata, and then we're taking our standards and simulate what is the effect of your parameters to our standard spectra. So we're going to simulate if we have a different solvent or magnetic field, how the spectra should look like on your specific conditions. So here we got already the results page, and similarly to IR, we have here the analysis results, and we see that the proper Gisalofop come out with a 97% of match factor, indicating that potentially it is your compound, while the starting material that we were looking for, it looks like there is a no match. So suggesting that there is not your compound, your main component, it is not that specific molecule. So when we go down again, as similar as Frederick shown, you have your spectra, you have the input spectra in green and the predicted spectra in pink. And again, you can also check the overlay to see how they resemble. And then you can zoom in, zoom out to check all the peaks. Further than that, we also have like the molecular structure with all the atom labels, as well followed by a table of assignments, which on the left side, so until this line, you have all the data from your sample, and on the right side, you have all the data from the standard. And then you can compare the chemical shifts, you can compare multiplicities, or also coupling constants and the number of protons with the relative integrals of them. So if you keep scrolling down, again, you can see all the analysis setup as well as the matching references that we had selected. So that was the product that came up with the 97%, while here we have the non-matching reference, and as well you are allowed to check as well how the spectra looks like, and then you can compare it with your spectra as well. So saying that, then similarly to IR, you can also approve or reject the analysis, and then you can create a PDF report, or you can share it as well by email. So quickly, I'm going to go and just show the last workflow, which is the quantitative non-targeted. So in this case, we know that we have that component and we want to quantify the component itself. So here we have again the spectra. We can click on non-targeted. So that means that the portal does not know which molecule you want to quantify. And what's happening on the background is it's analyzing all the peaks that you have. So basically doing all the peak picking and integration of all the peaks. Then here you have all the metadata from your analysis, and then it's asking you to what is the molecular weight of your compound. So if you don't know it, we still can calculate a concentration in solution in millimoles per gram, because we can calculate how many protons there is and how many millimoles per gram that signal should have. But as well, if you bring the molecular weight, then we can calculate by mass. So we can calculate the concentration in milligrams per gram of solution. What is even more interesting is that if you also bring what is your sample weight and your solvent weight, then we can calculate what is your expected concentration, and that means that we can calculate what's the purity of your sample. So when you scroll further down, you have also the step 2 is to check which peak you want to use for the quantification. In this case, I know that this number 6, it is the peak that I want to select because I know that it's clean, there has nothing underneath. So I just can click here, and then it's asking you how many number of protons we have, because as we don't know what is your molecule, we only can know what is the relative integral between them. So what's the difference between the signals, but we don't know how many protons there is underneath. In this case, we know there is only 1 proton. So when you're happy with the selection, you can do also multiple selection. When you're happy with the selection, you can just click on run analysis. And then what's happening is that we can quickly, straightforward, calculate the concentration. So basically, the theoretical concentration was 3.04 milligrams per gram, which is calculated by this weight divided by the sum of both weights. And this one is experimental concentration calculated by the portal, and is telling you that the mass fraction is 0.99 grams of your compound of interest per gram of solid that you weighted, or in other words, it's a 99% pure your sample. Then you see again the input spectra, all the peaks that has been identified, which one has been selected for the quantification, and again, all the analysis set up. And with this, I finished the quantitative workflow. So I'm gonna go quickly again into the slides. So I'm gonna give a brief summary of what we have shown you. So basically, we have shown you that ChemisTwin is an online platform for analytical spectra interpretation, which is a cloud-based, and you can analyze IR and NMR spectra. It is focused on standard processes first. And as we show you, it's large and growing databases, which is growing by weekly and monthly. You have always this traceability from the materials that have been bring it into database to the physical material. And definitely here, your opinion as an expert or any kind of feedback is highly appreciated. So with this, you can also, if you want to test it by yourself, please just use the QR code. You can send any email, or you can contact us, or also you can join this website shown here on the screen, and you can have it tested by yourself. I think we have another poll. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we do. Thank you so much. I was just saying that we did share that link in the chat, but I don't think it's working. It's a broken link, I think, for us. So we have shared the correct link in the chat. So hopefully everyone's got hold of that. And I think we'll include it in the follow-up emails as well, just to make sure everyone's got that. Let's bring up our final poll. There we go. I think we've shared it again for everybody. So the final poll, if you want to take part, is your lab working under good manufacturing practices? Probably less relevant to our academic audience, but absolutely have a go if you want to answer this poll. That would be great. So we will then move on to the questions. We have lots of questions coming in, so thank you to everyone in the audience. It's a very busy questions box, so I will get through as many as I can in just a moment before the end of the webinar. Okay, I'm going to end that poll there because it's about 70% yes on that. So yeah, 30% no, not using GMP. So there we go. I'm going to end that poll. Thank you for taking part again to everyone at home. Right, so where should we start? Actually, a really good question to possibly start on is we've had a few questions around data privacy concerns. How are people's data and when they share spectral data, if it's for collaborative research or commercial purposes, what kind of protections do they have there?
Yeah, maybe I can try to answer this. So we are very aware of this security concerns and the aspect of uploading your data from your laboratory into like a third-party platform. So we try to address the technical aspects of the security by a security white paper where all the measures and also the software architecture are pointed out to really ensure that the data you are uploading is not visible to, first of all, anyone from Merck, but also not visible to any other users that are not from your own organization. So of course, we want to avoid that someone who is coming from whatever academia group A is seeing the results from academia group B. I mean, this is quite one of the basic considerations we had. So this is ensured also in a contractual way. When you would sign into ChemisTwin, we would ensure that this is documented in a proper way. And maybe also here, think about it how like online banking was considered 10 years ago. And today we pay with Apple Pay and our smartphones, and it gets familiar to us. And I think the same change in thinking and concerns we will also see with such cloud-based services.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. I think that's good to know for everyone listening. Okay, another question from Selva. So yes, got some questions regarding how many chemicals or functional groups have been characterized so far. Is that possible for you to kind of give us an answer for?
Maybe I briefly address this for infrared spectroscopy, and then Albert will take over for NMR. So for infrared spectroscopy, we are about to have 30 to 40,000 spectra recorded in the platform, which have the recording and all the necessary meta information. Albert?
Yeah, so for NMR as well, we have like a variety of, definitely a lot of functional groups that have been also included for all the compounds. So we have really a big, vast variety of compounds. At the moment, it's a bit lower than the IR library, but we have still 3,000 compounds, which they can have different quality grade, and also, as mentioned, like tolerance of group functionals.
Okay, thank you. And sort of in kind of relation to that question, Zishan asks, are we anticipating additional spectroscopic technique data analysis, e.g. Raman, etc., being available in there?
So at the moment, ChemisTwin was launched for NMR spectroscopy and IR spectroscopy. And if this concept is resonating with the needs and demands from the laboratories in academia, but also in R&D and QC in industry, then for sure we also will add up additional technologies where Merck already owns the reference data, as it also comes out from our QC processes. So stay tuned. Maybe in the upcoming year, there might be additional technologies.
Okay, brilliant. That's good to know. Yeah, good question around what kind of training or expertise is needed to effectively use the ChemisTwin software. And they're saying in a professional setting. So this is probably not from an academic audience question.
Yeah, I think one of our aims with ChemisTwin is to make those analysis processes and workflows really easy to understand and to have it as intuitive as possible. And when you just take a look at what we've demoed you today, like this web interface and like with a lot of icons, a lot of easy to understand pictograms. So there is very little like processing settings and stuff you can really change at the moment by the motivation to keep it as simple as possible. So, and therefore also the onboarding is either, let's say, half an hour of having a joint call where one of our experts gives you a tour through the software, or just playing around with the tool, because you can't destroy anything. It's like just a web-based system. So I would say compared to established manufacturer software where you have so full range of like minute settings and parameters you can tune, we are on the very intuitive and easy to learn side. So don't expect 2 or 3 day trainings for ChemisTwin rather than 30 minutes.
That does sound very, very useful. And as you said, you don't need to download anything as well, which is, you know, with the current situation where we all have troubles with our IT systems, trying to get permissions to download things onto our machines. That's actually also really good, isn't it? Okay, another question. Can the software predict the effect of different solvents on the NMR spectrum? So
it definitely can do that. So basically we have this full database set. We have experimental data as well. We have this database from actlabs.com as well with the software. So what happens when we report in different solvents, then our standard is going to look for molecules that share really similar functional groups, and it's going to try to predict what is the effect on that specific, effect on the molecule into your sample. And that's how we can predict the effect of the solvent to use a molecule of interest.
Okay, thank you. Lots of great feedback, by the way. I just want to say a lot of people in the audience saying they're very impressed with the software. I think it's going to be very powerful and very useful, so that's lovely to hear. A question from Patrick, who also thinks it looks amazing. Can the software be utilised by natural product chemists in their NMR quantification work?
Yes, definitely. So the only thing that they need to do, as I mentioned before, they just need to calibrate the instrument, and once that's calibrated, then they can quantify anything they want. It doesn't matter the kind of product that they have, as long as they have a pure signal that is there, that is not overlapping with any impurity, they can then use it for the quantification and then quantify any compound they want.
Ah, brilliant. Okay, thank you. Another good question is, can mixtures be analysed by ChemisTwin?
So in the NMR at the moment, no. We're working on developing a solution for mixtures, and hopefully it's going to come in the upcoming years. I don't know about you, Frederick.
Yeah, so for FDIR, we are able to consider mixtures in the qualitative identification. So meaning when you allow the algorithm also to search for combinations of potential pure compounds that build together your sample, then this is possible. At the moment, we, I think, cap it at 5 or 6 different components. However, this is not quantitative, simply as the absorbance factor per molecule is slightly different in IR spectroscopy. So this would require individual calibrations, which is quite tricky. However, when you say you have a sample that might consist of 2 to 5 components, our software should be able to disentangle those signals and give you at least an indication what could be included into the sample.
Okay, thank you. No, that does sound useful. Brilliant. Okay, so another one, what substances are included in the FTIR library? As I also briefly showed, we started with the basic chemicals from our product portfolio, starting from solvents, but also flavor and fragrance, polymers. Think about basic pure chemicals that you can also purchase, basically. In the future, depending, of course, also on collaborations, but also the available data from internal laboratories, we will expand this into more and more niche markets. Also having in mind, for example, forensic applications, where we will investigate how we can include data from illicit drugs or narcotics. So this is also a route where we want to go, and we have to figure out what is actually available here to bring it into the portal. Yeah, definitely. Wow, that is absolutely amazing. It's going to be very powerful. I think a final question, because we're nearly out of time. Is it possible to add your own references into the software?
Well, here I have to play a bit with time. So I would say please come back in 3 to 4 months. So in the latest release, it's not available. However, we are already working on this feature where you can also take your uploaded spectra and use it internally within your organization as a reference. And I think this will be then also quite useful for QC departments who just want to compare today's batch in a production versus the batch from a month ago. So you just would store both data into the portal, and then you can make this comparison, but you can also search and identify by your previous measurements.
Okay, thank you. That was a good answer. That was a good short answer, and I like the fact that there's still developments being made, and I think that's great that you're listening to to the users and finding out what they might need. That's just brilliant. We are out of time, I'm afraid. So I'd like to say a big thank you to our two speakers, Frederick and Albert from Merck, for sharing so much valuable information about the ChemisTwin platform. I think you've probably all been inspired by that today. And thank you once again to Merck for choosing to work with Chemistry World again to share all this lovely information about their work. And finally, thank you to everyone watching, our lovely audience, for getting involved in the conversation today. I'm really sorry if I didn't get down to your question. We had so many in the questions box today, but we will follow up with an email for how you can contact everyone after this. And if you've got any other questions, you can follow up with Merck. So from everyone here at Chemistry World, we look forward to seeing you again in a future Chemistry World webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. Goodbye.